Oftentimes as a game master, you won't have the time or energy to prepare your own story, so let's talk about buying and using someone else's brainchild for your adventure. Hey fellow game masters, I'm Richard Quiner, and welcome back to another episode where we talk about being a game master and running someone else's adventure. That's right, campaigns, modules, adventures, stories, whatever you want to call them. Sometimes you're going to have to pick up something that someone else created and make it your own for your players. So we're going to talk about how you can better prepare yourself to run those kind of games. Now, there's 3 things I want you to keep in mind as we move through this episode. First off is sometimes you'll run into these moments where you want to ask, can I do blank? And the answer 100% of the time, the answer is yes, you can do whatever your idea is. The real question you should be asking is, how can I make this work? The next thing I want you to remember is you and your players decide how closely you follow the things that are written in the books. So keep that in mind. The books aren't there for you to steer your players on one path and get them from point A to point B without their input and their, personalities coming into play. The books are there merely as a guide to give you some characters and NPCs and things to help guide your players through an adventure without having to make your own for them. And third thing to keep in mind is you're going to have to read a lot. And I mean a lot. Like the book, a lot of times they come in a book and you'll have to read the whole book at least once. But the point of this video is to show you how sometimes you're in the situation where you only have maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours, maybe even 20 minutes to get ready to run some players through a campaign or an adventure, and it's a specific adventure that you haven't read before. So this is how you get ready for that. Obviously, if you have the time ahead of time, like if you know you're going to be running this adventure in the future, you buy the book and you read the whole book and you get everything out of it and just soak it all in. But if you don't have that option, here's what I like to look at when I prepare to run a pre-written adventure for my players. Now granted, every story, every publisher has kind of a different system of how they present their adventures, but the idea of what you're looking at remains the same. So number 1, the first thing you need to do is get a summary of the story. Oftentimes in the books they have a story summary, and it's usually a paragraph or 2 that breaks it down from point A to point B, beginning to end, in as few words as possible. Find that, read it, understand it. If you can do that, then you're already pretty set. If you are the type that likes to improvise and bring a lot of your flavor into the adventure, just having a summary of the idea of the adventure is enough to run a game. But if you're not that type, if you want a little more meat and potatoes with your adventure, then you gotta keep reading. There's more reading to be done. The second thing you need to do is understand the start of the story. All the adventures usually come with a start. Look in this area for little plot hooks, things that can tie your adventurers together, things that will make them want to go on this adventure. Sometimes there will be locations or NPCs or certain characters that come into play, or even very specific plot hooks that will come into play later on, and it's good for you as the game master to understand these things and know what's coming up, especially at the very beginning. It'll give your players a good, solid start. And if you're doing, being a game master in a situation where it's just a one-shot, and it's someone else's one-shot story that you are running, this is kind of the most important area, because a lot of times the setup for a one-shot is extremely important, and the middle is less so. So when I'm doing this kind of situation, whenever after I read the summary and I know the basic idea of the story, then the start is the first thing I read, and I understand what the author intended for the players to go through at the very beginning of the session. Now, side note on this, if you don't like what's happening on the page, if you read it and you're like, I don't like that starting point, or if you think, oh, my players won't like that, yes, you can change it. The answer is yes. Change it how you will. Oftentimes, when I'm doing things, if I see a starting point that I think my players will not enjoy, and I learned this the hard way by giving them things they didn't enjoy, I'll try and come up with several ideas that will hook the players into the story. The third section that I read, whether it's a one-shot adventure or a full-on campaign adventure, is the ending. Yes, I spoil the story for myself because it's not about me enjoying the story. It's not about getting to the end, it's about the journey. And knowing the ending, if I know the ending and the start, that gives me tons of space in the middle to play and have, some adventures with my characters and really, make it our own story. So that's why I always say go to the start, then jump ahead, go to the end, and if you run out of time there, then you're sitting pretty, ready to run your game. Sometimes this ending will have some really cool kind of themes or cool moments that the players can go through, or maybe they get a cool magic item. Maybe there's a little backstory of an NPC that the players will eventually meet. And by reading the end, you can find out who or what is really important to the story. Meaning, at the beginning, you're very early set up with, the adventures and a few NPCs. And at the end, there might be names in there that you didn't see at the beginning, but then because you see them at the end and you know that they have a end result, they're going to come up, so you can be, okay, you can kind of think, I need to have that NPC in my mind, which gives you an idea of what to look for next as you continue reading. So, the beginning, the end, get the details of the end, and remember kind of that. Now, at this point, if you've had a limited time to prepare to run the adventure for your players, you're still pretty good. You've got enough information to take them from the beginning to the end, and you can fill in the rest with your players and what they decide to do, because it's group storytelling, that's how it works. But if you have more time, like let's say you are given a week or 2 weeks to prepare to run a campaign based on a book, step 4 is to read the whole thing. Start at the beginning and start going through each section of the book one at a time and taking notes. Going through this kind of preparation in the beginning will help you not have to go looking at the book all the time while you're playing the game. The less you look at the book, the more fun you'll have as a game master and the more flexible you'll be with your player. So the more you read the book, think of it kind of like, you're priming the pump, you're putting the fuel in the gas tank, and reading the book is the fuel that's going to power your creative engine through the game. So by reading the book and getting all this information ahead of time, you don't have to stop along the way and just refuel. You can just keep going as the players are playing the game. Take a lot of notes here. Sometimes, you can read something and you can learn it. Other people read things and need to write it down to learn it. Other people needs to see and do and read and things to learn things. But, I can speak to you, I can speak to my own practices. If I write things down, it's going to stay in my mind better than if I just read them. So take notes. If you find a section that stands out to you and is cool and you really want that in your game, write it down so you are sure to remember it later on when it comes up. Now, a lot of these adventures are organized by place. It's kind of a weird structure that doesn't read exactly like a story. It doesn't read like a novel. So you'll get the basic outline of the story, and then it will tell you the different places that your characters can go and the different quests that will be involved there, and it's up to you as the game master to kind of bridge the gaps. If it's a one-shot, this is really easy because they usually take place in 1 or 2 locations. But if this is a full-on campaign, you're going to want to know all these different locations and how they can tie together, and keep notes of these for yourself, because it's always really cool when one location ties into another in a really smooth way that the players can really get into and embrace as the players. Now, the real question when dealing with reading this part of the adventure is how much should you read? And some people will say read the whole thing, and I did say that earlier, read the whole book. Eventually, yes, read the whole book. You're gonna want to know everything in here, and like I said, it's like putting gas in the tank. But sometimes, and here I'll explain my reasoning behind this, I say only read a couple locations. So as the beginning of the book, maybe read one city or the first and second city, and I think that's usually enough for the players. If that first city, like let's say you have city A, and as you're reading that you find that it ties into city B and city C and city D, then sure, you might want to read all of those, all 4 cities. But if city A really only ties into city B, for the first session, when you just start playing this campaign, you really only need to know about city A and city B, because the players won't really know too much about city C or D in that first session. So I kind of keep in mind how much the players are actually going to do. If you're running a campaign and the players just off the bat say, oh, I want to go to city F because they know it exists and I'm going to go there, then you're going to have to do some improvising and come up with your own stuff. But because I'm only reading about City A and City B, in my mind, to me and how I run my games, it leaves me some more room to be flexible. Like, I found the more I read about the adventure, the less I'm willing to let the players do their own thing. And it kind of gets me in this habit of like, oh, I'm gonna railroad my players because that's my story. I'm telling this story here. And my players might be like, we're gonna tell this story instead. And the more I read, the more likely I'm gonna wanna force them to go on my story, on my adventure, even if that is not what they want to do. So that's why I try to limit how much I read before the very beginning of the campaign, so I don't get stuck in the mindset of like, here, players, go here, do this, and I can see where they're going, and I can take things and put it in front of them, and I can be a lot more improvisational. That's the word I was looking for. And I find that a lot more fun, and I like to think that my players have more fun, but they haven't said if they didn't or not. So I'll keep you updated on that, I guess. Remember, as you're preparing for the session, that even your best laid plans will not survive the first contact with the players. They will likely go completely off book very early on, and you will have to improvise. This is where the gas analogy comes into play again, where if you have encounters and NPCs and quests kind of in your brain already, no matter where the players go, you can kind of move these quests and put them in front of the players and still be keeping with the feel of the book that you read or the adventure that you are running. It might not be exactly how it was intended to be played, but that's the nature of the game. Is every story is your own. Every story has to do with between you and the players, and that's okay if it changes suddenly and is not what you expected. So this video is not to be taken as like word of law. Pick your own way of how you're going to prepare to run these pre-written adventures. If you try my method and it doesn't work, cool, let me know in the comments below. If you try my method and it does work, even better, let me know in the comments below. I hope this has been helpful, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Hey, thank you for watching. I hope this channel has been helpful to you in starting your Game Master adventure. If you feel inclined, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And as you'll see to the right and the left of the subscribe on this little end page here, there are more videos to watch on this channel. So click around, check it out, and thanks again.